Welcome to Learning to Play's video review of Curriculum the Game. Today, we are going to walk you through how to play the game, and then we will share our thoughts and reflections on the game of Curriculum. Curriculum the Game allows players to act as school leaders, building their curriculum deck, collecting standard cards, and completing assessments as they move their students towards graduation. Let's begin by learning how to play the game. The setup of the game includes a curriculum deck and a lineup of 5 cards that can be purchased to improve a player's deck. Each player also has a starting deck of 10 cards and one of 4 specialist cards, either science, math, reading, or history. The color on their specialist card matches their student meeple that moves along a track towards graduation. Throughout the game, players buy curriculum cards to build their decks and increase the strength of their hands. Players must also collect sets of standard cards to complete assessment rolls using 4 or more dice. Passing the assessment allows players to move their student up a grade level. The game ends when a student reaches graduation. At the start of the game, each player shuffles their starting deck and draws their first hand of 5 cards. Before taking their turn, each player draws a challenge card that could potentially result in having to discard a card from their hand. For example, this card says, your assessment scores show an achievement gap between your different student subgroups. Discard any equity cards in your hand. Because I do not have an equity card in my hand, this challenge does not affect me and is just discarded. Next, the player plays their curriculum hand. Start by collecting standards as indicated by the text of the cards. This behavioral card allows me to gain 1 standard. So does the constructivist card, so I gain a total of 2 standards. Because I am a science specialist, the first time I gain a science standard each turn, I gain a free standard from the top of the standard deck. In order to attempt an assessment dice roll, I need a complete set of 4 standards. I currently have a math, reading, and science standard, and I only need a history standard for my complete set. When gaining my 2 standards, I can either take any cards from the lineup or take one from the top of the deck. Because I need a history, I will take this one from the lineup. I now have a complete set. I automatically replace that card in the lineup, and I can take another standard card. Because I am the science specialist, I will take a science standard and draw a free card from the top of the deck. Next, I complete the actions on the cards. This card says I can draw a card, so I draw one from the top of my deck and add it to my hand. This new card allows me to either gain another standard or to spend +1 funding. Because I have a complete set, I think I will use the funding to buy a card. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 funding points to spend in the curriculum lineup. The curriculum lineup has 5 cards I can purchase with my funding points. Each card has VP on the bottom left and a cost on the bottom right. I think I will purchase this student-centered card, which has a cost of 4. Whenever you purchase a card, it immediately goes into your discard pile. Now it's time to turn in my set of 4 standards to attempt an assessment roll. The number you need to roll to pass the assessment is determined by your student's grade level on the graduation track. Because I am green, I am on grade 6. I need to roll at least a 6 to advance to grade 7. Each assessment roll begins with 4 dice. Your cards may allow you to add dice, re-roll dice, or add points to your dice roll. This trust card allows me to roll 2 extra dice. This innovation card allows me to roll 1 extra die. I can also add 1 to my dice roll for my trust card and 1 to my dice roll for my behavioral card. And I can even re-roll one of my die if needed. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and because I can add 1, 7. Because I have passed the assessment, I can move from grade 6 to grade 7. At the end of my turn, my entire hand is discarded, and I draw 5 new cards. The curriculum lineup is refilled, and play continues clockwise to the next player. When a student passes the 12th grade assessment and earns their diploma, they graduate, and the game ends. The VP of each student on the graduation track are added to the VP on the cards in each player's deck. The player with the most points wins. Curriculum the Game is a fun way to learn about curricular theories and concepts. Players get to experience the challenges of being a school leader attempting to effect meaningful transformation through curriculum mapping, identifying challenges, mastery of standards, and assessment as players move their students towards graduation. The starting deck contains traditional, transactional, explicit, implicit, and null curriculum cards. In the U.S., traditional theory is the main foundation for most schools. This traditional focus establishes that the main purpose of education is to ensure that all students are taught a common curriculum, including reading, writing, history, and math. This perspective was supported by William Torrey Harris in the 19th century. He saw education as a means of maintaining the ideals of Western civilization and encouraging the principles of democracy. The transactional card allows players in the game to spend funding to accomplish tasks. According to John Wiles, transactional leaders act as managers, concerned with maintaining and overseeing the day-to-day operations of a school, as opposed to inspiring real change. All players in the game begin with explicit, implicit, and null curriculum cards, which is appropriate because according to Eisner, these 3 curricula exist at all schools. While the explicit curriculum is obvious and usually tied to standards, school leaders need to be aware of the underlying implicit messages being taught and how those messages might impact students. The null curriculum is what is specifically not being taught, and like the implicit curriculum, it may be the result of ingrained systemic racism and perpetuate disparity. This is why the implicit and null curriculum cards have negative effects in the game. The lowest level of cards that can be purchased in the game relate to some of the foundational theories of U.S. education, including experiential, constructivist, behavioral, and structure of the disciplines cards. Dewey was a proponent of experientialism, and he suggested that the purpose of education was to facilitate student development of reflexive thinking in order to promote the betterment of society. He believed that education needed to address the entire life experience of a child and take into account their needs and interests. Constructivists, such as Piaget, hypothesized that children learn by either assimilating or accommodating new information into their pre-existing mental schemata. Behavioral theorists such as B.F. Skinner focus on using reinforcements to develop desired behaviors and accomplish learning objectives in the classroom. The perspective related to the structure of the disciplines posits that each discipline has a specific mode of inquiry that students must learn. The next level of cards relate to the underlying concepts in these curricular theories, including social constructivist, student-centered, cognitive complexity, and standard-based instruction. Social constructivist cards are based on Vygotsky's theory that students learn from social interaction and collaborative discussion. The card's ability reflects the social aspect of curriculum by allowing the player to use a card from another player's hand. Student-centered learning engages the student by incorporating student choice, referencing their personal experiences, and allowing students to take ownership of their own learning. The alternative assessment card refers to the idea that teachers should look for alternative methods for monitoring student learning and growth, as pencil and paper tests are not always valid or reliable. The enrichment card relates to the need for schools to provide enriching curricula with art and music programs in order to engage students and allow them to pursue creative endeavors. Along those same lines, The innovation card relates to the need for schools to challenge students with innovative problem solving that sparks their curiosity and develops a passion for exploration. The next level includes quality instruction and data analysis cards that represent the accountability of the standardized assessments established under the No Child Left Behind Act. This level also includes the culturally responsive and equity cards, two concepts that were added to federal legislation with the adoption of the Every Student Succeeds Act. Calejo Perez suggests the need for reflection and inquiry, as well as community involvement, in order to effect meaningful school reform. These two concepts are included in the next level of curriculum cards in the game, along with disrupting assumptions and reconceptualizing curriculum. As Jacqueline Simmons suggested, we can inspire innovative solutions to educational issues by disrupting teacher assumptions about the purpose for education and what learning should look like. By posing these questions to teachers for discussion, principals can foster a democratic culture of shared leadership in their schools. While school leaders are reflecting and asking questions to challenge assumptions about learning, it is important for them to examine the history of curriculum studies in the United States. Research highlights the absence of communities of color in the foundations of curriculum studies. In keeping with Mill's revisionist ontologies, reconceptualizing curriculum to include the historical contribution of African Americans, Mexican Americans, and other marginalized groups will help to revise and repudiate the conditions of subpersonhood that the white majoritarian narrative has created. This reconceptualization of curriculum will allow school leaders to improve the equitable outcomes for the students in their schools. To really get to the bottom of the systemic racism that impacts education, however, school leaders must encourage teachers to regularly examine their own biases. Our actions as educators do irreparable harm to students. Trainings related to equity and culturally responsive teaching are only effective if we reflect on our own personal beliefs that may be impacting our behaviors with students. Unfortunately, white fragility frequently leads to defensiveness and denial that perpetuates racial inequities. According to critical race theory, communities of color need to be given representation. Educational leaders have a responsibility to empower those who have been marginalized and oppressed. True transformation in a school does not exist unless it exists for all students. James Baldwin called for teachers to fight the system of oppression back in 1963. Each teacher continues that fight internally when they examine their biases and empower all students. Lewis and Wallstrom suggest that 3 criteria are needed for a principal to be able to transform the culture of a school. These criteria are shared norms and values, shared leadership, and trust. In the end, however, shared norms and values are only meaningful to students if those shared values have been created through a lens of examining biases to eliminate as much inequity as possible. Shared leadership requires all teachers to be reflective about their own preconceived notions and assumptions that might impact those they are leading. And trust depends on teachers approaching issues with an open heart and open mind, being willing to listen to differing points of view and addressing their own biases. This is why the examining biases card is equally as valuable as the leadership qualities suggested by Lewis and Wallstrom. The most powerful card in the game is the transformational leader card. By creating a unified vision and empowering all teachers to take on leadership roles, school leaders can improve their school curriculum. If that vision is focused on eliminating personal biases, teachers can become transformational leaders in the classroom. Educators must advocate for their students, fight the system from within, rousing the conscience of the nation as they help all students succeed in this game of curriculum.